right, you're live.
Sounds good. All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Thanks, everyone. First order of business is approval of minutes from our September meeting. Petra sent those out this morning. Anybody have any comments, edits, or anything on the minutes? Nope. All right. If I can get a motion in a second.
So, second.
Second.
All right, all in favor? All right, very good. So it should be a relatively short meeting today. As you can see from the agenda, we don't have any new business. We've got a lot of old business, and so we'll just we'll start with that. So the first is the Kiowa Landscaping Work Group, Grow Native. I left it on the agenda just because I like to always keep it on here, but there's really nothing new to report on that one. Same with Shorebird Stewardship. So then we'll move to flood mitigation and sea level rise. John, do you or Mr. Chitwood have any updates you want to provide on the task force and the work that you guys have been doing?
We'll leave that to Jim and Jack and Dave.
Okay.
I can give it a shot, and Jack and Dave, or Dave, you want to do it, Dave or Jack?
Go ahead, Jim. You got it.
Okay. I think it's moving along very well. The report is just about ready to submit to the town and to KICA, and that'll be done just after Thanksgiving. The high-level conclusions you might be interested in that are going to appear in the report. There's a high level of concern and interest within the Kiowa community about the impacts of sea level rise, climate change, and flooding. And the amount of time spent annually on Kiowa, the number of years of property ownership, the longer those are, generally the higher the levels of concern. Very interesting. There was a lot of comments about a holistic package that brought people here, not just one thing, and that whole package has to hang together if they want to stay. Tolerance for personal inconvenience is greater than for safety disruptions, and some impacts are an inconvenience while others represent safety risk. Unacceptable situations on Kiowa were determined not just by severity and duration of an event, but also how often it occurs. Environmentally positive practices were very supported, encouraged, as well as monitoring of what's going on with the environment. And all the island entities need to work together, as well as surrounding communities. And so those were some of the main conclusions. I'll just cover a couple of other things here. Key recommendations moving forward, which I think are very important that we make those recommendations and that they're accepted. And our key recommendations are going to be to accept and refine these threshold conditions that we've identified with all this effort, and then commit to developing a fully functional adaptive management process, proceed with all the things I need to do to establish that. That'll be mainly done by the pros of various organizations as opposed to property members per se. Continue to collect information on, improve our understanding of our environment, including supporting research programs that add to our knowledge base. Monitor and annually report the results to KICA, the town, and the community at large. Just one more thing and I'm done, I think. This holistic thing, I think I've talked enough about the holistic thing that's important. So those are the highlights as I see it. So Dave, Jack, others, what do you want to add?
I think I was going to add and especially I think for a committee like this, is that there were about 4 questions that dealt with environmental issues: the beaches and dunes, salt marsh, maritime forest, and habitat. And the overall response across all of those was a very high level of concern, even more so than the questions that dealt with flooding and ability to get around on the island. So I think that really reinforces the message Jim was given, that it's not just about flooding, inconvenience you, or getting around your house, that people are very concerned that the environmental qualities of Kiowa be preserved and not be damaged. So I think that in some ways, I was a little surprised it came out as high as it did.
Anybody else?
Now, let me just comment on the process a little bit. As we had focus groups, we had, what was it, about 30 people or so involved in 2 different focus groups. And out of that built the survey that some of you saw that are residents here. And we had, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there were about 1,500 plus responses to that.
Right.
And out of that came many of the conclusions that Jim and Dave just talked about. One of the ones that was high on that I noticed a lot, and there was concern about the marshes, and something that we've talked about a lot in this committee and others. And I know that the Conservancy is going to push along in that direction. And I'm sure Lee's going to talk about that more at some point. So a lot of things that came out of this are, I guess, expected, but we were pretty happy with the response that we got from the community.
All right, thank y'all. Thank y'all for the update. All sounds good. Next is Grow Native Parkway Landscaping. So that project is finally underway. I don't know if you've noticed, we've had our contractor out there for about 2 weeks now, doing some initial cleanup and pruning of view windows and some overgrown vegetation. Has anybody noticed a better marsh view in a few places? Yeah. All right, so that work is finishing up this week. They're currently mapping out the irrigation and going to get the irrigation work done here in the next week or so. And then once that is done, they will start basically demoing sod areas, tilling areas, and they're going to work in basically phases. So they'll start by fresh fields and work towards the gate. And so plants should start going in the ground, hopefully the end of next week. And actually the first plants that will go in will actually be the palm trees and some other plantings along the curve between Mingo and Little Rabbit. So that'll happen, I think, next week. It might be the week after. And then after that, they'll shift back to the fresh fields area and then work their way to the gate. We're still hoping to have all the plants in the ground by mid-December. So anybody have any questions on that? All right, we'll move to rodenticides and wildlife. So I just got a few updates on that. Obviously, this is an issue we've been talking about for quite some time. I have a little bit of new information for you. So first on the Bobcat Guardian program, we have now, in terms of pest control companies, we've got 29 companies signed up. That's out of 74. So we're at 39% on that. We picked up 6 in the last week and a half. And that was directly as a result of some communications that the Conservancy had sent out, which seemed to get companies thinking about it again. And so, like I said, we got 6 additional companies signed up. The Conservancy has also launched a Guardian webpage, if you will, where they're listing, the companies that have pledged as well as the companies that have not pledged. So the hope is that will again, continue to encourage companies that haven't signed up to go ahead and sign up.
Jim,
Yes.
so do you happen to know what percentage of the business on Kiowa those 29 companies represent?
Yeah, I mean I don't know. What I have done is taken that list of 74. And while we don't have income information for all the companies, they're required to report it as part of the business license process. So they've got to report income for the prior year when they were new. And so I've ranked all those companies in terms of income. So I can tell you that we have most of the companies that generate a lot of income have signed up. So, but right, I don't know if they have 300 accounts on Kiowa or 1,000 accounts or 100. But for the most part, we've gotten to the big pest control companies that do the most business out here, with a few exceptions. We're still missing a couple.
Thank you.
Yep. And then, so we talked about how some of the steps that the DPR has laid out as to how they, are going to continue to monitor SGA use on the island, impacts to the environment. And so 2 things in that arena that they promised. They had said they would deliver these to us by the end of October. They haven't. But so the first was that they were going to basically visit and inspect all 74 pest control companies that work on Kiowa. Originally, they were going to ask them about SGA use, both historic and current. They ended up backing off of that, and they basically produced an anonymous online survey that these companies are asked to participate in. Like I said, we were supposed to get those results by October 31st. We don't have them yet. So I don't really know how that's going or what kind of, responses they've gotten, but hopefully we'll get that information soon. The other thing that they had promised was a research project of sorts to again look at, are there fewer, are there less SGAs in the environment now than there were before, these voluntary programs went into place. And so what that research project ended up being was last week we had 4 biologists from DNR who were down here for 4 days. They set traps for 3 nights. So they were here 4 days. They trapped 3 nights. They set about 100 traps per night. The goal was to catch anywhere from 60 to 80 or 100 animals, have them all tested, and basically, have a baseline for, how prevalent SGAs were in all of those animals. They wanted to focus mainly on rodents, so rats and mice. And so the results of their trapping for last week, they caught 10 total animals. They caught 4 raccoons. They caught 2 possums. They caught 3 gray squirrels. And they caught 1 roof rat. So was not as productive as they had hoped it would be. And obviously, the fact that with 300 trap nights, they only caught one rat or mouse, that probably tells you something. So I don't know if they plan to come back to do some additional work. But at least those 10 animals that they did collect, will be sent for necropsy, and they will have anticoagulant testing run on the livers as well. Don't know the time frame for getting that back. Let's see. So the other update on that is that we actually put it out in eBlast today. But as you know, Aaron and I, working with Matt and the KICA folks, have been picking up dead animals, sick or dying animals, since this all began. And so since our last meeting, we've had 4 additional animals tested. This included a bobcat that was hit on the exterior parkway. That bobcat had low levels of 2 different SGAs in its liver. We also tested 2 raccoons. One of those had been exposed to 1 SGA. And we also picked up a dead screech owl, which is the first bird we've tested. And it tested positive for 1 SGA. So to date, we as the town have tested 14 animals. That includes 5 bobcats, 7 raccoons, 1 possum, and a screech owl. And 13 out of 14 have been exposed to at least one SGA. So that certainly, just reemphasizes, how prevalent, these products are in our environment, and that they're still here now, despite all the voluntary efforts. Any questions, comments on that?
We, at the Conservancy, we had a meeting this morning and we wanted to know what the next steps were.
Next steps in terms of,
What is the town planning to do? I remember you said that you were going to fold our rodenticide committee into another committee that the town would take over. And I asked this morning if we have one of the members, they haven't heard anything. I know you're getting ready for the election and all of that. And so we were just wondering what's going to happen next. And we talked about telephoning the companies. We came up with a number of ideas, but we understand the town has to take the lead. So we just want to know what your next steps were.
yeah, so I don't know that the town has to take the lead necessarily, with things like communicating with the pest control companies and regimes. And this is something we talked about in the Conservancy's Environmental Science Committee last week, and had a number of folks on that committee interested in coming up with a more of a direct communication strategy. So yeah, making phone calls to regimes, making phone calls to pest control companies directly. And so at our last meeting, we did talk about the creation of a rodenticide subcommittee. We actually did create it, and then my chairman backed out on me. So we probably need to talk about that again and figure out exactly the best way to get some traction on that. And so if it's, going back to forming, that subcommittee of the town, or merely having folks from this committee assist with the Environmental Science Committee of the Conservancy's efforts in that regard. And that's mainly in regards to, the Guardian program and trying to get more folks to sign up.
Do you think that reaching out to other communities, I know that has been done. I know the Coastal Conservation League has been involved. I know the Onondaga Birds of Prey and even Seabrook were willing to help with this. Have you talked to any of these people about the problem or the update?
Sure. I've certainly talked to the Coastal Conservation League quite a bit, as well as a number of folks. I mean, I think that, overall, the town's position remains that we are still in the right. While we had hoped that DPR would grant the temporary prohibition, they did not. And so we are still waiting on additional data before the town makes an official decision on re-requesting that ban. And so again, the town formally is basically waiting on this information from DPR on the survey, the research that they did, before we push any sort of, legislative or other effort to address the problem.
That was one of the questions that was brought up in our meeting this morning, the legislative issues. So you're saying that we need to get more information before we or the town goes that way? Is that what I'm hearing? I've got to report back to them, so I was trying to get that information correct.
Correct. Yes. It is
Okay.
my understanding that the mayor and the town are still waiting to make a decision on that based on the information we get from DPR.
Okay, good. Okay.
But that means that the things that we can do are continue to push this Guardian program. And I think, directly communicating with all of these stakeholders is critical to keeping it moving forward. And so
Yeah,
we just need to figure out the best way to do that.
Exactly. And I think that we were talking about, we need to really emphasize the broader impacts on the island. That's something that you really pushed forward in our meeting the other day. I think that it's very important for the people on the island to realize this not just affecting the bobcats, but all of these other upstream animals. And so we need to figure out how we can do that together. So I just want to, this committee, so backed out of the, as chair, or was there somebody else you appointed as chair of that subcommittee from the town?
At this point, no one has been appointed chair of that subcommittee.
Okay.
Jim, do you think that the state is just going through motions to keep us off their backs while they leave things steady state, or what do you think?
It's a good question. You know, I think that DPR recognizes there's a problem, and they have obviously taken a lot of criticism and negative publicity, and so you know they're trying to do things to kind of change the narrative, and I think you know their heart is in the right place, but I'm not sure we're going to get to where I think we need to get to with the efforts that they currently have underway.
So if their heart's in the right place, are they just inept?
To the point, Jim.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
Well, people are thinking about that. I got another question, Jim. Is it possible that somewhere down the road we get to the point where all the animals that eat this rodenticide are dead, and that the animals of prey don't have any of those things to eat?
But potentially, you know, I think that, you know, unfortunately, we just don't have and don't really have a mechanism to get good data on, you know, historic SGA use and current SGA use. And so trying to monitor it in the environment by testing animals it is a challenge, especially because, you know, if you take something like a raccoon or a bobcat, right, you know, if they pick this stuff up, it's going to stay in their liver for 200 to 300 days, so almost a year. And so just because we're picking up positive animals now doesn't really tell us that one way or the other, if we've reduced, I mean, obviously we've reduced the use of SGAs out here in the last, you know, year since all of this happened. I mean, a number of companies have changed. So there's no doubt there are fewer of these things out there, but we have no good way to quantify that. Now, if we had data prior from, you know, let's say we tested 40 raccoons every year going back 2 years, and then we did it into the future, then we could certainly, you know, pick up a decline in this stuff in the environment. But in the position we're in now, it's tough to do. And so, you know, I think hopefully long term, we end up with a legislative solution. You know, we're not there yet, and that would take some time. But you know, it's a tough situation. And so honestly, I mean, I think the best thing we can do, at least as this committee, is continue to put pressure on pest control companies, regimes, property management companies, and entities to voluntarily stop using these things. And so, you know, I think having a group of folks, and, you know, if anyone wants to re-volunteer to chair this rodenticide subcommittee, you know, and then, you know, work closely with Jane and her committee, and the number of folks on there that have volunteered to make phone calls and, you know, reach out word of mouth to neighbors and others. You know, I think that is a good strategy at this point.
I have a question, Jim. If the Conservancy already has a chairman, and if I heard you correctly, you're not sure it has to come from the town first. Then those of us who volunteered to be on Lee's committee could just join that one possibly. Is that feasible?
Well, I mean, that's a question for Jane. So I was referring to the Environmental Science Committee of the Conservancy, but they also had a rodenticide task force, if you will, that was Jim Gillum's committee. And I don't know where that, Jane, is that committee still up and
No.
running, or they've pretty much completed their work?
They completed their work, but they were folding into your committee. That's what we understood, is that committee would fold into your subcommittee or whatever. And that's what was brought up at the meeting this morning. And we told them that we would try to find out more information about that moving forward and what it had.
Bradley.
I think I might add that, one of the things with the discussions between the Conservancy and the town is that, with the formation of all these committees, that we would kind of take the town's lead on trying to put any information out, because we realize this is a pretty political issue, and we wanted to make sure that we're not, going forth and doing something that the town wouldn't deem necessary or appropriate. So I think, although you said that the town doesn't have to take the lead on it, we kind of were under the impression that y'all would kind of give directions toward it. So I think we were waiting to see the formation of the committee so that our task force committee can be re-upped and go ahead and start doing some work, if that
Yes.
helps clear things.
Okay, so who wants to chair the rodenticide subcommittee? No volunteers? Everybody's muting themselves?
Go for it.
Would the person who is volunteering for this committee, do they have to be on this environmental committee, or can they be outside?
I think they could be outside. It would be better if they came from this committee. At least, and whoever volunteers to chair this committee, that basically just means that you organize it and assign work to people. And so if there's someone from outside the committee that you think might be good, then perhaps someone on this committee just chairs it, and then that person does a lot of the organization and legwork to organize things.
There might be some possibilities that were on that rodenticide subcommittee. I guess Lee and I can talk about that and then get back with you if that's okay. And unless somebody else on this committee wants to take it on, that's great. I feel very comfortable with anyone on this committee taking that there. Yes, so I'm not looking at anybody specifically. Looking all around. But,
Hard to tell who you're looking at.
that's true. Yeah. So if that would suit you, unless somebody gets in touch with you, Lee and I can talk with Donna about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't hesitate to let us know or let Jim know, and then we'll see what we can come up with. Because we really want to, there was a lot of passion on the Environmental Science Committee the other day, trying to move forward with this issue. It's very important. We think it's vitally important with ecological health coming up.
Yeah, I agree. Lee, was there someone you had in mind?
In particular, somebody on that task force committee, I think a good starting point might be Jim Gilliam. He's on other town committees and he's familiar with how to run them. And he's done a lot of legwork on there. I'm with Jane. I think we just need to see who fits best and who's willing to volunteer for it.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll table that for now, and I'll wait to hear back from y'all on that one. Let's see. So that is it on rodenticides, I think, unless anybody has any other comments. All right, we'll move to deer management. Not a whole lot to update there, other than we completed our fall deer survey in October. At 123 deer per square mile, which is the highest density ever on record for Kiowa. So not a surprise. We knew numbers were going up. We knew that a lot of fawns, we were seeing lots of fawns out there, this summer. And so no surprise there. In addition, our deer vehicle collisions have spiked this year quite a bit as well. We're probably, Matt, we don't have great numbers, but I know we've had, I would almost say we're double what we were last year. And so that's, obviously just a function of more deer out there. So we come up with our annual deer density estimate based on a fall and or winter survey. And so the next set of surveys will be in January. And so once we complete those, we'll have our formal estimate for 2020. But it seems almost certain it's going to, obviously it's going to be pretty high and will probably be the highest on record. We still plan to do our deer harvest this winter. It's likely going to be January before that begins. And at this point, the plan would be to remove 100 deer. Anybody have any questions on that?
Jim, how many square miles is the island?
Well,
You're on the island.
it's around 8 square miles. So if you just count the uplands, so 8 square miles, do the math, you're close to 1,000 deer. Probably more like 8 or 9, probably more like 800 or 900.
984?
Yeah,
Yes, about.
it's a lot of deer.
So you'll cull about 10%,
Correct.
and those are does.
Correct. Yeah. And so, I think we recognize that we probably need to take more than 100 because 10% is not gonna make a big difference. And so we'll get through the first 100, and then obviously we'll continue to monitor the numbers and adjust as we need to.
Jim, is Seabrook going to call as well?
I do not know what Seabrook is doing yet. They normally make their decision in December based off of their spotlight surveys.
I mean, that seems to me that's that spillover. It spills over into here or vice versa. So
yeah, there's probably some movement of deer between the islands, but probably not a whole lot. I wouldn't think.
With the population of 1,000 on the island, what's the recruitment potential or probability for a season?
So historically, we've seen about 0.3 fawns per doe that survive. And so if you take, our buck to doe ratio it's not quite 1 to 1. It's probably closer to 2 to 1. So if you just do some quick math, right? If you've got 1,000 deer, you've got about 600 females. You probably got about 450 adult does, and then you've got some fawns. And so, in a given year, right, you're gonna add those 450 does are going to produce 0.3 fawns a piece. That's historically what we've seen, but right now our fawn to doe ratios are running closer to 0.5. So, we're potentially adding another 200 to 250 deer, based on our current population each year.
Which informs the culling numbers.
Absolutely.
That would be necessary.
Correct. Yeah. And so, we'll basically, run the deer management program kind of using adaptive harvest management. So obviously this is our first year. So, we're starting with a relatively low number. But basically we'll kind of fine tune that based on population numbers and figure out the number we need to harvest to get the population where we want it to. So it may be that we need to go back this year and harvest some additional deer. It may be that we wait till next year. But yeah, we'll certainly fine tune the harvest numbers to get the population where we want it to be.
And Jim, what will happen with those deer?
So all the deer that are harvested will go to a local deer processor. All of the meat will be donated to a charitable organization. Typically, it goes to, in projects I've worked on in the past, it goes to 180 Place, but it's also could go to Low Country Food Bank or some other places. But it's a lot of high protein food for folks that need it. So you figure you get about 30 pounds of meat per deer. And so multiply that by 100 and you've got 3,000 pounds of meat, and I think they consider a meal-sized portion to be 1/4 pound. So, you're looking at 12,000 meals for folks that are less fortunate. So that's a good thing.
Yes.
What would be the ideal population size that you would think for the island, so that a couple of years down the road that you would be aiming for that as a target?
Yeah, I mean, our overall goal is to get back to where we were prior to the big increase, which was around 60, anywhere from 50 to 70 deer per square mile. So we really don't want to get any higher than probably 80, but ideally we'd keep it around 60 or 70 because, we didn't have any major issues then. We weren't getting a lot of complaints. We weren't hitting that many with cars. And so, obviously we also hope that, our bobcat numbers will increase and we'll start to see more predation on fawns, and that'll help slow the population growth. But yeah, so our target goal is around 60 or 70 deer per square mile. So we're almost double where we want to be right now. All right, moving on to Kiowa Conservancy projects.
Jim, could I ask one question sort of related to this, Jack?
Sure. Yeah.
Speaking of excess animals, one of the things that came up in our surveys for the Sea Level Rise project was people commenting on the number of alligators, and not necessarily enthusiastic about them. So what's the latest on alligator surveys?
Yeah, so just like the year we survey for alligators every year, we do it in the summertime. And, our numbers are relatively close to what they've been historically. We've had some ups and downs, but generally the population has been fairly and continues to be fairly stable. The whole discussion of reducing alligator numbers and is there a need for that, has been discussed at length. And alligators, as a rule, control their own numbers. They really don't become overabundant like deer do, because if you've got a lot of alligators, then when little alligators are born, they get eaten by the bigger alligators, and so they kind of self-regulate themselves to stay in check with the amount of food and habitat that's out there. So no plans to do any sort of a harvest of alligators to try to reduce numbers. All right, Lee, do you have anything on your conservancy projects you want to update on?
Yes, I do. So I'll give some updates to the town projects and also to a addition to our proposals that we had back in September. So start off with the groundwater project. Back in October, we actually pulled all of the information out of our data loggers and we put it into our database. And we've been running some analysis on the groundwater table levels and getting that straightened out. One of the things that came out of this is we were able to share data with Kika and the town, and we actually received back the sea level trends from the Kiowa River tidal gauge, as well as some weather data from the weather station on the timbers, and we were able to kind of correlate between rainfall and tidal levels, and kind of compare and contrast information from those. In particular, we took a well out in Rhett's Bluff, actually at the boat landing, and we started to kind of mess around with that data to see what we have. We started to see that there's a high correlation between rainfall and increased groundwater table level. And we started to notice an anomaly where there was during a king tide event that we have a perched water table. And this happens to be at a point when there's not really much rain occurring. So we're starting to think that there are some influences due to the tides on the groundwater table. And at that time, we did see a spike in electrical conductivity. So, there's higher salinities during king tide events. And so we're going to look into this a little bit further. Of course, we only have about 3 months worth of data in this current batch, but it's going to take a few years to really kind of solidify what we have. But we've shared some information with DNR. We shared it with Andrew Tweel, who works in the ACE Basin, and he's been able to share some information with us, and we're trying to glean some of that out and see how it correlates with some information from the ACE Basin. So we're continuing to kind of learn more about the groundwater and how it's being influenced, and I think we'll have a good idea of how to approach some management issues going further. I believe that DJ Moulton, our graduate assistant who's working on the project, actually presented our project and some preliminary groundwater table maps to the Geological Society of America conference that happened in October. And I've heard that it looks pretty good. I'm really happy to see some of the projects, the products that come out of that. But once I get that information, I'll be able to share it with everybody. For the marsh project, we've actually been making some headway on some visualization on the changing marshlands. So we were able to take the marsh shorelines and actually draw out more polygons and such to be able to actually visualize where the accretion and the erosions are happening. I believe that with the way that they created it, it actually helps visualize these changes a lot more effectively than the Amber analysis, which is a little bit more technical, but I believe that the maps that are coming out of that are actually a little bit easier to interpret and use for management purposes. So that's a good result out of that. And Jim, if you ever want to take a look at them, I might actually send those to you sometime this week to take a look. They're just shape files, if that helps out. So one last thing on the town projects. For phase 2, we proposed the phase 2 marsh projects, and it has a few things in there related to kind of figuring out information about how to deploy specific restoration designs, that sort of thing. But we were approached in October by the College of Charleston with an interesting opportunity that I think is pretty great, and it has statewide implications. There's a product called the unvegetated vegetative ratio that was developed by scientists at U.S. Geological Survey with some assistance with NASA. And SCDHEC, OCRM, SCDNR, and the Nature Conservancy are actually looking to roll out a vulnerability analysis using this method for the entire coastline of South Carolina. The College of Charleston has been looked at as the people to kind of figure out the process and being able to help them roll it out. And they have chosen Kiowa Island as the specific pilot site, which I think is pretty interesting. With this project, we would actually get the information before all of the other communities in South Carolina. We would also obtain kind of more detailed information compared to what the final product from the state would be, at least from my understanding. So this is a pretty interesting development. I'm hoping to propose this to the town in December, but I wanted to let y'all know that that's going to be an addition to the marsh vulnerability phase 2 proposal.
Sounds good.
Who's heading that up at the college? Norm?
Yes. Norm will be working on that with assistance from Alex Bro. He is the GIS specialist that's in charge with kind of rolling out some final products out of the lab for us. And this will, I think, will be continued kind of throughout the next year with some funds that we have from the ECRF grant that we received from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And one final word on that specific federal grant, we have started that, and we are going to start reaching out to stakeholders in the community. Specifically this week, we have a project overview that we're going to review with some of the major entities, including the partners, the resort, and ARB. So looking forward to that, and kind of going ahead and engaging with the community to talk about some nature-based solutions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Lee. All right, so we don't have any new business, so we'll move to reports, and we'll start with me. So I'll run through my usuals. Alligator research, the Clemson study, that is wrapped up as of October. So we're just now awaiting the graduate student to finish analyzing data and produce her write-up. Should be another few months, maybe towards the middle of next year. Quick update on Bobcat GPS work. As you know, we collared 4 bobcats this past winter. 3 of those died. So we've still got the one that still has a working GPS collar. And then we actually collared a new bobcat last month on October 18th. Don't know how many of you saw that. I think we put it out in an e-blast and on Facebook. But it was a really neat cat to catch. So this was a cat that was wearing an old collar, had been hanging out at the bird banding site at Captain Sam's, eating birds out of Aaron's nets every morning. And so Aaron has been wanting to catch it. And so we normally don't trap this time of year. But Aaron had been setting 2 traps out there every day for the last month or so. Finally caught it. Of course, he caught it on a Sunday morning, which never fails. You never catch them during the week when you're actually at work. But anyway, we were able to get a collar on that cat. She's now wearing collar 450, and she was an adult female. She weighed 13 pounds, 3 ounces, and she is 13 plus years old. We caught her originally in April of 2008 out near the ocean course. We caught her 5 additional times between 2008 and 2012. So the collar that we took off of her had been on her since 2012. We hadn't caught her for 8 years. And so really neat that she's survived this long. She's pretty close to the record for the oldest bobcat in South Carolina, which is 15 years. And she could be that old. We just know that she was an adult when we caught her in 2008. And so we did take a blood sample from that cat and had it sent off for anticoagulant testing. She did test negative, which was not really a surprise. Since anticoagulants only stay in the blood for a couple of weeks. And we know she's been eating mostly birds for the last 6 weeks. So apparently hasn't been picking up any of the anticoagulants. So we've got 5 collars to deploy in 2021, just like always. And so we plan to start that work in January, probably mid-January. And again, we'll be taking blood from all those cats to again test for anticoagulants. Any questions on that? All right, a couple bird related projects. So painted buntings. Aaron's got 34 nano tags out on birds. As I reported our last meeting, we've got a new tower to monitor these tags on top of the timbers. Aaron's been downloading data from that tower, but we don't have any results on that yet. Marsh sparrow banding will start next month through April on big high tides. Aaron's been doing that project for a number of years. The Christmas bird count is scheduled for Monday, January 4th. It's going to be slightly different. I don't know how many of you have volunteered in the past. I know some of you have. But like everything else, due to COVID, there'll have to be some additional guidelines and protocols put in place. So we're working on those. And once we come up with a plan, how we're going to do it, it'll be smaller groups, more spread out. We'll let the community know about that. Fall migration banding. So this is the big project that takes place between August 15th and November 30th every year. 2 sites, Captain Sam's and Little Bear. To date, they've banded 6,678 birds, 4,123 at Captain Sam's and 2,555 at Little Bear, and had 1,399 recaptures. So it's been a good year. 89 different species so far. And we got another couple of weeks to go with that project.
Jim, anything unexpected in terms of species? I'm sensing after all the years I've lived here that there are changes in the bird populations, species-wise, and that's what I'm wondering if there's anything that Aaron is seeing.
Yeah, I mean, probably nothing specific. Certainly, there are fluctuations in bird species abundance from year to year. Aaron could speak better to any long-term trends, and I know that he's working on or has worked on pulling together a lot of numbers, and so we've got a report we hope to get out sometime soon that might speak to some of that. They did catch a few unusual species, a Western species or two, and then a species from the Caribbean. They probably ended up here during one of the tropical events.
We see a lot more spoonbills than we ever did before.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there's certainly more spoonbills around than.
And I photographed a number of whistling ducks that we just hadn't seen before. So
yeah, those are both species that, if it's climate change or warming weather that are roaming further north, typically we're restricted to Florida and further to the south, but have been expanding northward for a number of years. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure lots of you saw the pictures of the black-bellied whistling ducks from the preserve, which is the first time that we've documented them breeding here. So there was a brood of ducklings that were born and raised out there this year, which were pretty neat to see.
I was there about 2 hours ago, and they're around, and there were spoonbills there. I see storks there more and more and more. So lots of ibis. So.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I saw those whistling ducks and didn't have my camera with me that day, and all the little ducklings were there. Oh.
They're pretty cute little guys.
They were.
All right, well, that's all I have. We'll move to community association. Matt?
Yeah. All right. I was making sure my mute was on or off, I guess. Let's see. It's a couple weeks ago, we sprayed kind of a part of you spraying tallow trees, Jim. We got some Phragmites sprayed, which if you don't know, is a pretty highly invasive plant. Tends to kind of want to be in wetland areas. So we have it around some of the pond edges and then in some of the wetlands. The preserved wetland was one of those spots. So we sprayed some Phragmites, maybe close to 3 acres total, 2.5 to 3 acres total. But it was in a lot of different spots. It was mostly small patches. And land management, along with lakes management, we're all kind of transitioning to a pruning season. It's just what we do every year in the winter, but we're kind of moving into that. And maybe another update is the Parkway, the new, the new water control structure that's been done. If you're inbound on the island, it's all that new green grass on the left. you can kind of see into the River Course neighborhood a little bit, but that's going to be the project itself. Construction wise has been completed, and then we've got a big planting kind of revegetation effort that's going to be coming here soon. So you'll see some changes with that. Hopefully lots more plants and trees and things filling in the big gap that was created for the work. So I think that's about all we have on our end right now.
Yeah, Matt, one quick question. Do you have an idea of what types of plants they're putting in the new area?
I do. It's a lot, and it's all like native species, and it is a huge variety. I know Layla and Doug looked it over. So our landscape managers, and there were some concerns that some of it is susceptible to deer eating it and all that, but I don't know. I mean, that's going to happen. And to me, that's like, well, that's good in a sense. Not that we want to boost our deer numbers by feeding them, but they also do need vegetation. So I think there's a lot of pollinator type species. There was grasses. There was also all the way up to trees, so of course there's some palms thrown in there. I can't think of specifics, but I know it was very diverse. It's going to be a pretty dense planting plan from what I'm aware of. So I'm kind of excited to see it, because I think it's an opportunity. If you got to do work and then you have to revegetate it, it's nice to put it back in a good way, I guess, to promote a lot of things. So.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a good move, especially when you're trying to establish a habitat in there while it still is functioning as some type of drainage infrastructure. That's really good to hear. Thanks.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Matt. Golf resort, Liz?
I'm here. We really don't have anything new going on.
Okay. ARB, Sarah, anything?
Nothing new to report.
Conservancy?
Lee, you want to tell them about the Conservation Matters program coming up on Thursday?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, we've worked with Dr. McElroy to look into a vegetative survey and an invertebrate survey for the dunes. We are holding a Conservation Matters event with him on Thursday at 3 p.m. And we have Lee Cobb asking him some questions, and I think it's a pretty good program. Everybody should take a look at it when they get a chance.
Sounds good. Thank you. Lynn, anything Turtle Patrol?
Just a couple of things. Last month I reported that we had a total of 342 nests. We only had 341. Don't ask me why, but seaturtle.org doubled up one of the entries, and neither myself nor Michelle can get rid of it. So it looks like we had 342, but it was really 341. Our last inventory was October 18th in Zone 8, and that was where you probably saw it in the paper, the leucistic turtle that was, light in pigment. We don't believe that the whole nest was that way. Whether there were others, we don't know, but there were a couple of pipped eggs in there, and those dead hatchlings were the color of a normal loggerhead. Couple of weird things that kind of goes along with our COVID year. Charlotte actually matched up a false crawl, which was a nest. She matched it up by date, by GPS, and by our mile markers. So I don't think that that's ever happened before. So there's two things. On a good note, and I want to thank Sarah for all of her help with this, and I don't know if you can see it, but we had some temporary signs made up that are attached. They'll go up May 1 and come down October 31st. And they are in the highly populated rental areas of Zone 6, 7, and 8. This year, Jim, I'm hoping to expand it into 5, which includes all the beach in front of the sanctuary and Turtle Golf Course, right in that area. That's also highly populated. I know, Brian, I want to thank Brian for installing those for us. It was great, even though it was only for the last month of our season, actually 18 days of our season. But I wanted zone captains and any volunteers to see that we had them and that we were in the process of completing that, that part of what we wanted to do. And tonight we have our end of the year Zoom meeting with DNR and with Brian. So I wasn't sure we'd be able to pull that off, but Charlotte and Brian were both able to come up with a date that works for them. So that's why I was asking Petra earlier about recording, because there are several turtle patrollers that contacted me that can't make it tonight. So I'm going to try and record it for them so that they don't miss out. But other than that, our season ended early, October 18th. So we've just been kind of waiting for next year and what kind of changes are going to come about or what kind of things are not going to change. It's kind of hard to know, but I already have people contacting me, giving me dates for when they would like to join Turtle Patrol and perform in either a hatching or nesting capacity. And I've just said, get back to me in April because I'll never remember from now to then. And explained that I didn't know what DNR was going to do, whether they would be lifting any restrictions or whether they would still be here. So we shall see. But it was a great year. It was a great season. The volunteers did yeoman's job because they were out there a lot where we couldn't have new people here. And so they did a great job. They were very impressive.
Lynn, I have a question for you. And you might have mentioned, I might have missed it, but did DNR report any of the nests that they usually canvass for out at Little Bear?
Yes, and they had, see, they've now made that a separate project. So it isn't lumped in with Kiowa's nests. And I'm not going to remember the exact number, Lee, but it's in seaturtle.org. And it would be under Sandy Point.
Okay.
That's what that project is called. Sorry.
All right.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Chairman's comments, I have none. Any committee member comments? All right, motion to adjourn.
Move.
Second.
All right, second, all in favor?
Aye.